first. Excellent. So good evening, everyone. We're all over the world. Lydie, fantastic to have you. Thank you for joining our seminars. And just to introduce Lydie, she's the managing director of the Anticancer Fund. They're doing impressive work, much needed in today's age of search for innovation and solutions in oncology, and we're eager to learn from you. So Lydie, the floor is yours for you to decide how do you want to engage the audience. We'll hear for you.
Thank you. I first would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to explain the vision of the Anticancer Fund when it comes to using public money for clinical research in oncology. And I really hope that the audience will challenge me because it's how we see things, and I'm certainly open for discussion. So first, I would like to illustrate why the public and how the public funding could be used, and why the current system is focusing mainly on the financial return on investment. So that automatically leads us to the need for what we would call a complementary development pathway that really focuses on societal return. So yeah, maybe some definitions here. How we see societal return in the case of cancer patients means that the new treatments should have added therapeutic value. And in the oncology field, that's defined by better overall survival and better quality of life. And as you can see here, the overall survival we would expect from a new and mostly more expensive therapy would be between 4 or 6 months, as defined by a WHO report. Of course, also unmet needs that are dealt with means societal return. And the societal return for the government would be if products are affordable, because affordability in the Western world, at least in Europe, is not really a major concern for patients, but more for the governments, if they can afford the new therapies, yes or no. So first question, does the current system really bring that patient value as I just described it? Well, there are quite some studies on this topic, and what we learn from that is that there have been in oncology plenty of new products in the past 10 years, let's say, but that most of them really not fulfill those criteria. This is a study on EMA-approved product over a period of 5 years. And as you can see, if you look at those products after 5-year follow-up, only half of them really show a better overall survival or quality of life. And also the mean overall survival benefit is limited, 2.7 months from this study. And if you now look at data, at more data, and this is a study over a 12-year period from FDA approvals in solid tumors. And what you see here is also, I think, quite disappointing results. The median overall survival is only 2.1 months. And if you see at this long list of all new products, I highlighted the ones that meet the standard that we say more than 4 months overall survival benefit, and you see it's quite limited. And this study is also very interesting for other reasons. By the way, it's a study from Andrew Law, who is a health economist. And for me, really, I'm a scientist, but I would call out to health economists to look into those issues, because that's where we really need input, I think. Because you see all those new products in oncology, but a lot of them are actually what he calls Me Too products. And that's true. Those are targeted therapies, as they are called. We also call them the IPs and the APs. They are either monoclonals or chemical compounds, but they all target the same gene, way of speaking. And so they say there's a lot of innovation in oncology, but if you look at it in more detail, there's a lot of me too, and there's not a lot of really valuable clinical benefit today. Of course, this is from the period until 2014. And then you will hear people say, yes, but nowadays, for the past 5 years, we have immunotherapy in oncology. And that really makes a big difference. Because before that, there was the whole hype of targeted therapies, while now we are more focused on immunotherapy. And indeed, those new products, what the group of checkpoint inhibitors, they are called, are certainly valuable in certain indications. But again, we see the problem of Me Too products. Because when you look here at the curve of clinical trials with the same product, well, not the same product, different products from different companies, but all for the same target, that famous PD-1, then you see that in a short period of time, we got like more than 400 trials with checkpoint inhibitors, and that's from 2017. Today, we have like around 800 trials ongoing with checkpoint inhibitors and in combination. Of course, there's value in it, but I think we should organize it better and really, save patients from doing the same thing over and over again. So, and in what direction are we going? Immuno-oncology is really a hype, and okay, there's some good reason for that. But if you look here, then you see that we're now moving from checkpoint inhibitors, which are T-cell targeted immunomodulators, more towards cell therapy. Here you see for a period of 2 years, a really explosive growth in new products. And let me illustrate that to you in a different way. This is a slide I borrowed from Carl June, and Carl June is the kind of the godfather of what is called the CAR T-cell therapy. For those who are not familiar with that, let me explain. CAR T-cell therapy is a new therapy where cell therapy, you take immune cells from your patients, you transfer them to the lab, you manipulate them in the lab, and you give them back to the same patient. So that's a real personalized therapy. But as you can understand, it's a very complex and also expensive process. So what we have on the market today in Europe is 2 products, Kymriah and Yescarta, from 2 big companies, Novartis and Gilead, and again, for the same target. And interestingly, in orphan disease. So it's in blood cancers. It's for lymphoma and leukemia. But this slide from last year, I must say, is already outdated, because I can tell you that in the circle indicating the filed products, today there are at least 5 products under file, CAR T cells under filing in Europe. And again, some of them are also for that same target, CD19. So what we have seen in the past, in my view, is even worsening. We get more products from different companies, but all for the same target. And they say, oh yeah, maybe that's competition and we will have cheaper products. Well, not really, because the price setting of these products is between 300,000 and 400,000 per patient. And it's a one-time injection. And as you can see in the broader circle, there's really an explosion of new startup companies looking into this type of products. So this brings us to what I think are the real drivers here for development of oncological new treatments, and that's the financial return. And I'm not an economist, and I really would be happy to be challenged. But how I perceive it is that what you see is that the original findings and the IP is at the university labs and the research in the research centers, and mostly supported with public money. And then licenses are given to spin-outs or to small companies. They will bring the product to an early phase clinical trial. And if that is successful, they are bought by the big guys. And if you see the money that is paid for like rather small companies, it's, in my view, huge amounts. And then, of course, that would be then the research costs for your product. If you end up with a small indication, then it seems like quite logical that the price setting there is really in that order of, let's say, between 300 and 400,000 per patient. And as I mentioned before, you see here 3 products, all for the same target again. So there, the question is, does that all brings really value for the patient? And is that what the patient is waiting for? So let's see the opinion of some really influential people. Denis Lacombe, who's heading EORTC. And his comment is in line with what I think. Our current development pathways are really focused on drugs and not on patients or the need from patients. And even I found this a really nice short paper from Richard Schilsky, from the vice president of ASCO, if I'm not mistaken, who also points out and refers to this fairy tale of the emperor's new clothes. Yeah, cancer is the emperor of all diseases, as you know. But if you look at the clothes, then it's supposed to be great. But what is really out there is really not that great, at least today. That's also my perception. So that's the reason why I think that there should go more public money into clinical development. And the question is, can we do that? Are there possibilities, realistic possibilities, to develop new innovative treatments without the support or involvement of pharma industry? And I would say yes, there are at least 1 or maybe 2 domains of research where with public money, you could do clinical research independent from pharma industry and for the benefit of the patient. The same conclusion actually was made by, in the Netherlands, by a report that was commissioned by the Minister of Health to get, I will translate for you, they asked, how can we get new drugs better, faster, and cheaper? And they also came to the conclusion that non-commercial drug development is desirable in the area of drug repurposing and also in the area of cell and gene therapy. But I will mainly focus on the drug repurposing area. Drug repurposing is quite a, here again, we need a definition because drug repurposing is used a lot. And there's also commercial drug repurposing, which is not necessarily bad, but it's okay. It's not what we are focusing on as non-profit. And let me give you some examples of both. So the most famous example of commercial drug repurposing, I think, is this product, Viagra. The product was originally developed for angina, but it never made it to the market. It was shelved, but then the company realized there was quite an interesting side effect for which it finally was fully developed, and that's how Viagra made it to the market as a very successful product. Another commercial development was thalidomide, which was on the market for nausea, but was taken off the market, was withdrawn because of the side effects, and then repurposed for multiple myeloma, successfully repurposed, a good product. We now see a lot of repurposing ongoing for COVID. And I think it's really a revival of the whole repurposing idea. If products are still on patent, then of course there's an interest from companies, and we've seen this happening. You might be aware of the repurposing of those anti-rheumatic drugs, tocilizumab and anakinra, for COVID. The latest results, unfortunately, are not that positive. Remdesivir has been repurposed, as you know. But what we are interested in is the fourth scenario of repurposing. And this is with products that are generic, that are off patent, that are available on the market for certain indications, so that you can access them to perform clinical trials with what we would call off-label clinical trials. And that has also happened in COVID. So we made a database of all the generic drugs that are repurposed for COVID-19. And yeah, I think it's not a surprise when I will mention hydroxychloroquine amongst others. So a lot of trials have been supported with public funding and driven by investigators to really see if there was value there for those generic drugs. And this is actually exactly the same scenario that we are looking into for cancer drugs. We made a public database, and where we are listing all the generic drugs that have some level of evidence for being used in oncology. And today we are at more than 700 trials that we could list worldwide. Most of them are early stage trials, and some are late stage. And also here you see several known products that are assessed in those type of trials. Also at the Anticancer Fund, this is exactly our area of focus, and where we are financially supporting a number of some of that type of trials. Like, for example, in pancreas cancer, we have a trial ongoing, perioperative, with a beta blocker and an etodolac, an anti-inflammatory product. Well, all this information can be found on our website, so please have a look if you're interested. But I would like to come to this example, which is a very nice example from a trial set up in the UK for prostate cancer, for advanced prostate cancer, and where you have several arms. It's a multi-arm trial where you have combination of repurposed drugs that are assessed side by side. And I really think this is the way to go if you use public money for trials, that you should go for direct comparison. And this is also a very interesting lesson that we learned from COVID, that the right answer will come from well-designed trials and preferentially multi-arm trials. Because you might, as I mentioned, there was chloroquine as an example. There were like more than 200 trials with chloroquine, but small trials, not well designed, a lot of discussion ongoing. And there was that one very well designed multi-arm trial, the recovery trial in the UK, and that gave the right answer, namely that chloroquine was not was not proven to be valuable for COVID patients. And now there's really a call out there that we should have more of this type, also especially for COVID. We should have more of those multi-arm trials if we want to come to solid conclusions for patients. So that was the idea of clinical research and development of new therapies in oncology with repurposed drugs. The other domain where possible academic groups could do drug development is in the domain of personalized cell therapy, because it's obvious that you don't, for autologous cell products, you don't really need entirely pharma industry for that. But today, both in the US and in Europe, those autologous cell products are very stringently regulated, which is what they should be. It's called ATMPs, Advanced Therapy Medicinal Products. And within EMA, those ATMPs are looked at, I would say, by a special committee, the CAT, the Committee for ATMPs. And it's this committee that will approve all the CAR T cells upcoming and so on. So what we see now happening is that there is a lot of interest in those new cellular therapies, and that academics are working hard on different, not only on CAR T cells, but also on dendritic cells, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, all kinds of approaches of autologous cell therapy. But how will these products ever reach the patient is the big question, because we are investigating today what their ideas are about this pathway of reaching patients directly from the university labs. And we do that together with the other Belgian foundations, as you can see in the right upper corner. But when we talk to the researchers, for them, the cost of clinical development and also the complexity of the regulatory system, it's really tailor-made for industry. And for them, they have no knowledge, no skills, no incentives to go all the way down, all the way along the road of really development and regulation to reach finally reimbursement. So here again, I really think we have to reach out to health economists to think, is there a possible business model for this? Because interestingly, politicians nowadays are quite upset about the high prices of those new cell therapies in oncology. And just like last month in France, I've heard that they have an amendment, a bill has been approved in Parliament that says that the university labs should produce CAR T cells at a price of which is 10 times lower than the commercially available CAR T cells. But okay, I'm really curious to see, and also in the Netherlands, we see the same things happening, that politicians are calling out for lower prices and talk to universities, but we have this whole regulatory system that has been established by the politicians. And so I really see a conflict there, how we can solve this problem. So what is happening today is the business model on the left side. All the knowledge, the scientific knowledge is in the academic environment, and they will spin out and they will transfer to pharma, and then pharma will take care of the whole registration, marketing, reimbursement, and very important also, especially for CAR T cells, which are genetically modified products, pharmacovigilance. So the question today is this a possibility for an in-between model, which would be a kind of social SME, and that would end up with reasonable prices, and then a direct transfer of from SMEs to the patient? But there again, that SME will need the skills for production, quality control, regulatory approval, the whole pathway. Or is it even thinkable that the hospitals, the university hospital, would become a market authorization holder and a provider of those, let's say, high-end cell therapies? I don't have the answer, and I really would like to have input there from skilled people and in business models. Because yeah, we just mentioned here some ideas, but if you're interested, I could go deeper. But maybe I should go on, because besides public money for public clinical research in the development part, I think we also need more public clinical research for what I would call the assessment of all the new oncology drugs, both commercially developed or non-commercially developed. I think we should put the bar at the same level for all products development, for all products. So when we look deeper here, what are the possibilities for to perform interesting clinical trials in this arena? I come back to what I call the platform trials. So comparing multiple treatments in one large platform trial. And here you can even think of models where you have, as I explained with the Stampede model for prostate cancer, where you compare a commercial product to an, let's call it a non-commercial repurposed drug, for example. Because if we really want to focus on the patient and we want to know what the best treatment is for the patient, then we need what is the comparative effectiveness. And this is something that is not happening today with all the new commercial products. Really not, it's very logical. Companies shy away from head-to-head comparisons. And then we have to make decisions by comparing clinical trials with different designs. And yes, as scientists, you know, you're not supposed to compare different clinical trials. So this approach with platform trials could be a very useful solution, but then we need public money to support the whole infrastructure. And then you can think of companies paying for their arm in the trial. And also nonprofits could try to get the money together to pay for their own arm in an infrastructure that provides all the needed support for the overarching trial. Other parties here, like EORTC, are now trying to deal with what they call therapy optimization. Because again, with all the new drugs coming in oncology, companies very logically are looking for optimal return on financial investment. So for them, for example, the longer they can treat a patient, the more beneficial it is for them. But sometimes a shorter treatment might be as good. Let me illustrate with an example. I'm treated as a breast cancer patient. I was treated with a biological called Herceptin for 1 year. But then there are quite some data that indicate that half a year would be as good as 1 year. But today, this is there are no formal phase 3 randomized trials performed with sufficient good data to switch the guidelines from 1 year to 6 months. And also for those new immunotherapy, EORTC is currently looking into that. If instead of 1 year treatment, you can, for example, switch to half-year treatment. So it's really looking at better treatment schemes for improving overall survival and quality of life for patients. But there again, what you need is public money to support this type of research. Another type of clinical research that is absolutely not of interest to the pharmaceutical industry is de-escalation. There again, my personal experience For my breast cancer, the standard treatment is a combination of 2 chemos, but you can drop the anthracyclines, 1 chemotherapy, for the specific type of breast cancer that I had. But there's no randomized clinical trial, but there are data out there. So my oncologist and also my team, we all were very happy with the data that are out there. So I only got 1 chemotherapy and not anthracyclines, which made a world of difference because I could continue my work and yeah, it's very well supported. You don't lose your hair. But while most university centers now tend to go for that different protocol, not fully compliant with the guidelines, a lot of breast cancer patients today still get treated with the classical scheme. But de-escalation studies are needed. Well, not anymore for that application because there are sufficient data out there, but there's a lot of de-escalation trials now planned in breast cancer for less chemotherapy, less radiation, where organizations like BIC, the Breast International Group, are trying to support, but more support would be really welcome there, and it really would benefit the patients. So what should change? If we want to go in the direction of clinical research that really benefits patients, I think we should have more collaboration with public money, and especially for drug repurposing, we need some adaptation to the regulatory system. First, public funding. In my definition, public funding comes from the public either through taxes or through donations. So I know that mostly public funding is defined as funding from governments, but I think governments and philanthropic organizations should really collaborate on that. And so the money that comes from the public should go back to and really serve the public. This is a scientist's point of view, of course. For once, I think even people from industry agree. As I said, repurposing of generic drugs is really not within their remits. So there, I think we even won't have opposition from the pharma industry if we want to do research in this area, and if we want to bring new treatments to patients. As you can see from this quote, they could agree with that idea. So yes, as I said, what we need is collaboration. And again, COVID, I mentioned that recovery trial, that big UK trial, where both commercial and non-commercial products were compared, by the way. And that was really a good example where the UK government and both the Wellcome Trust and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and also Oxford University financially contributed to that big and quite complex trial. Do we have interest in the oncology field? I would say yes. Today, the Belgian government, for example, gives 10 million a year for what they call pragmatic trials, really this type of trial that could serve the patient. The European Cancer Organization, within 2 weeks, is organizing a summit, and there will be some topics on that whole idea of therapy optimization. And some of you may be familiar with the Mario Negri Institute. And there also, there's a big interest in independent clinical research that really focus on patient benefit. And this is a slide I got from Silvio Garattini, who spoke at the drug repurposing event that we organized, and who also really is a big proponent of the whole idea of independent research. So I will as I mentioned, what we need is a change for the drug repurposing again, a change in the regulatory system. Because, yeah, the regulatory system today, I think it's really familiar for this audience. You go from preclinical data, you have your repurposing candidates, but then you do your clinical research that is evaluated by EMA, and then you go for authorization, reimbursement, and clinical adoption. That's a normal pathway. But what we see is that if you want to bring a product from off-label to on-label, that today only the market authorization holder can do that. So for 2 years now, we have been talking to the European Commission, more precisely to the STAMP group, the expert group for safe and timely access to medicinal products, on how we can solve this issue that if you come up with really good clinical trial results for repurposing a generic drug for a new indication, what can the regulator do to approve that? And I must say, in a nutshell, not much today, because they are fully dependent on the willingness of the market authorization holder to change the label. That's the situation today. But okay, we will look into that further. The idea is that we should try, they will give scientific advice for free, EMA, and then you, with that scientific advice, and if you do your trials compliant to the scientific advice, then maybe the market authorization holder could be more willing to work together and bring and make the label change. But for that, there will be an official call for pilot project, and that's planned for this year. Well, beginning of next year. It was scheduled for March, but it has been postponed, of course, due to COVID. Sorry. And also in the US, the same ideas are out there. And there, the Friends of Cancer Research are also pushing hard in the political arena to make it possible that when third parties come with data to the regulator for having a new indication on the label, that there should be a system in place that the regulator can kind of ask the market authorization holder for making this change. But of course, this would be, the ideas they have in the US are more, how would I say, more detailed, because it's one legal system, and in Europe it's much more complex. What is suggested here, I don't see directly how they can organize it, while in the US, when you see here, when they talk in that section 213, they really have some very concrete proposals to have this implemented. So I will try to conclude that we can still have some time for discussion. So how we see a potential very beneficial use of public money is that we would have established some kind of a parallel development pathway for clinical research that is driven by science and patients, and where we work together with academia and with investigators to come up with new treatment ideas that are beneficial for cancer patients. And of course, this is complementary to what the pharma industry is doing. I don't really see it as competition, maybe for the cell therapy, but that remains to be seen, certainly not for the drug repurposing, I think. Because yes, we don't want to hamper the new drug development, but in the end, we have to compare the results from both systems and by independent clinical research and bring the best drug product to patients. And we think it's not now the right time to bring this whole discussion to the table, because as you might know, in Europe, cancer is or was high on the agenda before COVID. We had, on the one hand, the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, and on the other hand, the cancer missions. And it's kind of interesting that that whole idea of missions for research and innovation in Europe came from Professor Mazzucato, who said that the states should be more entrepreneurial. And that's exactly what the message I would try to pass here, that if we want really the best treatments for patients, that we should not leave it only to the pharma industry, and that the states, both Europe and also at the national level, should take really action to assure that those treatments are properly assessed and maybe invest in proper assessment of the new cancer drugs. So yeah, this is my last slide with some philosophical thinking that I think we really need to assure that all treatment options can be properly evaluated, and not only the ones that have commercial value. And yes, it will be an uphill battle maybe, but yeah, at least at the Anticancer Fund, that's where we are trying to go. And I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Lydie, thank you so much for this insightful talk. And on the line, we have people who are a lot better qualified in oncology than me. I have millions of questions for you, but I think I'd like to give them a word first. Do you mind stop sharing the slides so we can see everyone who joined the call? And who wants to go first? Go ahead.
Should I go first, Lisa? Or?
Go ahead, of course.
Thank you, Lydie. It was a very very fascinating presentation, and I must say that I've got this subject at heart at the moment, because I believe that COVID has given us a brilliant example of the potential interest of repurposed medicines. I also believe that I have a slightly different views when you say that there is no direct competing interest with industry. I genuinely believe that industry does not have any interest on, will try to do everything that they can do to go against the repurposed medicines, because basically they are cheap. When they are effective, they are extremely effective, and these products are really going against the interest of industry. So, however, I just wanted to have your thoughts on one specific example, because this whole story of repurposed medicines to me is a double-edged sword. And I wanted to take the example of hydroxychloroquine that you have perfectly mentioned. And the idea originally was promoted by Raoult, and you know the story was very interesting. And suddenly Raoult made these ludicrous claims, saying that hydroxychloroquine would solve the COVID problem. And personally, I went to the French, sorry, not the English, French press to say how wrong he was and how stupid the claims were. But we saw the devastating effects of using hydroxychloroquine in the world, Nigeria, US, whatever. So, what are your thoughts, Lydie, on this kind of double-edged sword of how, or in other words, if I can be more precise, during COVID there was no regulated development of use of medicines. Raoult made ludicrous clinical studies, or appalling studies, which were repeated. And my question is, how can we make sure that repurposed medicines can be developed and used in a kind of state-of-the-art way?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and indeed, that is the big danger of repurposed medicines. As soon as you make some noise about even preclinical results, we've seen that happening, for example, with bicarbonate. There were very good preclinical results from a group in Lee Moffitt, and then all of a sudden cancer patients would all use bicarbonate to treat their cancers, while there was a good scientific background, but the proper clinical development was, well, they were trying to do it, and finally it turned out that they could never reach the needed doses in humans to make it work as to reproduce the mice examples. So it's all about dosing there. And that's what often happens. We've seen that happening before, and also with DCA, with all kinds of products in oncology. And there's a really big danger, because then it takes off and it has its own life. So you need to really regulate it stringently, I think. And the most important is the thing there is that you need money to do right away the good trials with the off-label use of products. But as I said, ideally, you have to do right away large trials, well-designed trials, and avoid the, what I would say, the unauthorized off-label use. And it's really a matter of communication. And I'm fully aware of the danger in that communication, because we've seen it happening a lot in the oncology field. Same thing with aspirin, for example, aspirin for colon cancer. It certainly has value, but we are now currently participating in a very large phase 3 trial for aspirin in colorectal cancer, but it's an expensive trial. It's very difficult to include patients. It's not a sexy trial, but I think we really need these results to finally convince the authorities. So yes, that's the double-edged sword, and the answer is only high quality trials can solve the problem, and high quality trials means collaborations and money.
There is one element, and I wanted to capture your thoughts on that as well, Lydie, because there is one element that I'm very balanced with repurposed medicines when we say that we want academia or to take over the development, but also I'm thinking more in terms of marketing phase, because when a product is authorized, you have mentioned pharmacovigilance, the distribution of these products, having a very close pharmacovigilance. I'm not convinced. I shouldn't say that because I'm from a pharmacovigilance background, but my impression is academia or the public sector does not always have the correct infrastructure to do proper distribution of or supply of medicines, production of medicines to a scale sometimes which is very large, or proper pharmacovigilance. And you did not mention, in fact, the incentives in terms of tax reductions, incentive like some companies have for orphan products. So what are your views of still companies being involved in the manufacturing, production, supply on pharmacovigilance on these products once these products prove to be effective?
Yep, I fully agree. That's exactly what we have been discussing with the STAM group. In the ideal scenario, you have, as a third party, you come up with you get scientific, you go with your ID to EMA, you get scientific advice for the well-designed, let's call it pivotal trial. And then with public money, you do this trial. And once the data are there, you sit together with the market authorization holder or the preferentially the originator company, because the generic companies, that's already a difficult playground. And there you all agree on what has to be submitted, and they only have to go for the type 2 variation, a new indication for their products. I fully agree that's the ideal scenario, but as you know, in reality, they're even reluctant. We will see with the pilot trial, but our experience is if you contact the companies and you explain that they only have, in the end, they only will have to submit the type 2 variation for a label change, even that might be a bridge too far. And if you say, okay, maybe you can think of an SME and a company and do a rebranding, but there's the big danger if the rebranding goes with a price increase, then you get misuse, and that's what we have seen happening with the Lydie. I don't know if you're familiar with that story, but where indeed the company just repurposed a drug that was used off-label for an orphan disease, and then they just got orphan designation. They just repurposed it. The clinical data were out there, but they did the price times 500, I think. And then they even arranged that the API was not available anymore for off-label use. So really, patients were left out there. And that's, yeah, it's now on trial. It's called Lydie is the company, an Italian company who organized that. But yeah, actually they found a loophole in the system by doing that. And I think...
Sorry, Lydie. I also believe that, unfortunately, the Directive 2001/83 is very protective of pharma industry, because when you have, for example, dexamethasone, take the example of dexamethasone in COVID. I mean, if you would have to have a company taking dexamethasone to register it with a brand new application for the COVID indication, what the hell do you need preclinical pharmaceutical studies on all these studies for this kind of products? There should be in the Directive 2001/83 a provision for repurposed medicines, and at the moment there is nothing.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. I gave that example. For dexamethasone, I must say there is a solution, and actually that was a solution we also proposed a long time ago in the stand room. I don't know if you've seen it, but what EMA did, they give a scientific opinion. According to Article 5.3, there is a positive scientific opinion from EMA for dexamethasone in COVID. And they could do the same thing for other repurposed drugs.
Well, but it was not, I mean, it's still, you still do not have any medicinal product officially authorized in COVID containing dexamethasone. So the opinion is okay, it's a scientific opinion, but you still do not have an official product authorized in application. But it's very interesting. But Lydie, and just for my curiosity, you mentioned the stamp from the European Commission, and you said that it's at the moment they stopped it because of COVID. But do you know when it will restart?
Yeah, I'm part of the observatory group who is looking into this pilot project. We will have the first meeting again next week. And the idea is that they're hoping in Q1 2021, there will be a call from EMA for pilot projects.
Okay, I will, Lydie, if I may, I will certainly contact you because I'm working on the field of repurposed medicines at the moment. So I will probably, and I'm so keen, I mean, I'm very keen to have this move forward. You know that it has been a topic which has been very high on the political agenda in the UK. There has been the AMRC report on that. And it has been discussed at the House of Commons. At the moment, unfortunately, the project is also stalled, but I think it should be restarted because it's an important one. So I will contact you, Lydie. But it's a fascinating presentation.
Lydie, thank you for that lovely presentation. I'm sitting here almost in despair because if the hurdle of trying to get repurposed drugs just from the beginning step wasn't big enough barrier to try and overcome. What you've highlighted is that the marketing authorization process is frankly completely warped and doesn't work. It's not really fit for purpose. And the regulatory aspect of this is highly vexing and frustrating. I mean, I listened to that webinar a few months ago that you kindly invited me to. Nicola Andre and Vishal Galwali were one of the sort of panelists on that. Yeah. And basically, although there was this free scientific advice from the EMA, frankly, they couldn't have made it more of a disincentive for trying to get independent third parties to try and actually get over these difficult hurdles, because they're basically also saying in the same breath, oh, but we actually need there to be a sort of commercial, financial sort of gain with all this, otherwise we're not really interested. Yeah. So it's not really a question, it's more, I really feel that this is an annoying situation where, is there something that we can do to raise awareness of these issues? Because first of all, I think a lot of people don't understand. For example, as you said, pharma are well placed, they've got massive resource, they've got manpower right up, as high as you need, so they can navigate this complicated sort of labyrinth of sort of registrations for trials and doing all the sort of red tape, whereas for poor independent academic or some of the publicly funded or non-profit organizations, there's no way they can really easily get through that system very well. So is there a call to action that we could do, maybe to publicize this as an open access piece that we can do as a position paper, I don't know, for maybe some of the key big journals, whether it's BMA, some of the European ones as well? I just feel as though we need a louder voice here. So anyway, it's just to say thank you for giving this outline, and whatever we can do behind the scenes, I'll try and help.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear, and I must say we have those little steps that we are making. Like for example, we had a PhD student with us, and her PhD is fully on the issues that I discussed here, and I showed one of her papers, and she now has a secondment with EMA. And for 1 year, and she has been asked by Francesco Pignati to present to the whole oncology group in EMA the whole issue of drug repurposing. So those are, I think there's quite some opening, and EMA is now really preparing for, it will take a long time, but I feel they are preparing for drug repurposing.
But, what you said as well. Sorry, yeah, go ahead, John.
Well, I'm going to be a bit more skeptical. You asked for criticism at the beginning.
Yeah, please do.
I want to ask you, given the data that you showed, that most of the drugs don't go past a reasonable barrier for either survival, short-term survival, and certainly not for cures. I think I would put it to you that reflects the biology of cancer. Mm-hmm. I don't understand, and it's a genuine naive question, how you think that repurposing yet another small molecule will be any different and go through the barrier. I mean, if you look at lenalidomide, there was a big fight about whether that should be approved that we heard about on one of these webinars a while ago. And it gives a maximum of, I don't know what it is, I think 9 months survival. So, in repurposing, do you really think you're going to get, what's the reason that you think that these molecules are going to be different from anything else? Because we've seen what all the others do, and there's a plateau. Yeah. The only place, just to be positive, the only place there isn't a plateau is with CAR T. Because then there you're curing people.
Yep. Some of them.
Yeah,
and only in blood cancers.
Yeah, but they're cured.
Yeah, true. That's, I admit, that's valuable. Yeah, to come back to your first question, I agree, but with what we see with repurposed drugs, that you can make combinations, and I don't think there's going to be a single drug, but let's see, for example, in glioblastoma, it's very early. We combined like 8 8 repurposed drugs with temozolomide. And yeah, there were some hopeful signals, but the same stringent rules. We have to continue, we have to do the proper clinical trials. And I think, yeah, it's worth a trial. It's really the same rationale, as you rightly say, with the targeted therapies, not very hopeful. With some repurposed drugs, there, and especially combinations, you see things that are promising, but I can't give you the answer because we haven't done the trials that you should do to get the right answers. I'm not saying this is the repurposing will be the silver bullet, certainly not, but especially with combination, and what we are also looking into is combination with immunotherapy and things like that. You could get incremental steps. It won't be the sensational solution, but it should get a fair chance.
John, could you flip that question the other way round, though, and say, even if the repurposed drugs are not necessarily better than the ones that are Me Too farmers, they're actually considerably cheaper. So in terms of opportunity cost in healthcare systems, if we were at least to replace comparable repurposed drugs that might be less toxic, even if they're more efficacious, is that not also a drive to consider some of them? I'm just putting it out there. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
No, I buy quality of life, and I buy the pharmacoeconomics of it. But I think the biology tells you that looking at hundreds of drugs, which we saw in that table from Tito Voja's article, which has been updated, by other people. The biology tells you that this isn't going to work, and combinations are great, but all the studies of combinations, and I was involved in one of them, show that they're toxic. That's the problem.
The combinations of those targeted therapies tend to be quite toxic.
Yeah.
I must say, and again, our trial with the 9 drugs in glioblastoma wasn't that toxic in the end.
Toxic. Okay.
But okay, it's really a small example. But I agree that toxicity with the target therapies and that type of combination is a major issue. But again, with repurposed drugs, it might be different, but remains to be.
That's true. If the toxicology is better, that could be certainly true.
We're over time. However, the discussion continues to be very interesting. So anyone feel free to disconnect if you need to go, but I think we still have a few more questions. So Lydie, if you don't mind.
No,
Christina.
I'm fine.
Yeah, so Christina, your turn.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, Lydie. Thanks a lot for your talk. And I'm leading a Foundation for Cancer Research Support in Russia. So I was really fascinated to see that we are facing absolutely similar problems with regulatory authorities. We share your mission. We support a lot of academia-driven clinical research, and including those with repurposing drugs. And we are currently initiating a campaign to communicate with our regulatory bodies to improve the situation around the market authorization, further market authorization after academia-driven trials. And it's a long way, and I would appreciate an opportunity to discuss with you probably separately your experience and how we could apply that in our country. But my question is, we live in the reality now. So my question is regarding your experience in interaction with pharma, because we still have to communicate with them in case we want to have an additional approval. And in our experience, it's been really hard to convince them to expand existing indication, especially in case of patent loss. So what is your experience in that? What are your hints how you can convince them to follow your path to expand patients?
Well, we've been trying hard, and first of all, it's very difficult if you're talking to big players like, let's say, Pfizer, to name one, to get to the right persons to discuss. And that's something we took up with the FPA, and they are willing to help out there, blah, blah, blah. But even if you get to the right persons, it's really, remains difficult. We talk to them, and we haven't found really interest in working, collaborate. Oh, go on, and then we will decide later on. So that's mostly the answers we get. We haven't succeeded in really collaborating. Also, we talk to like Teva and the big generic producers. Okay, in some cases, they might consider providing us, giving us the products for free, but they don't want to make any commitment for further engagement and really going for type 2 variations as we want or requesting. I must say that maybe for you or for the UK, what they are Friends of Cancer Research in the US are proposing, I said it's on the political table, and I've had it on that slide. What they are really proposing is that the FDA should look into the data themselves, that they should be proactive, and if there are really good data out there that support a label change for a new indication, that FDA will ask the company to change the label, and that the Secretary of Health in the US could even force the company to change the label. That's what they are, that's what proposed in those bills and so on. So maybe that's a hint for the UK, since they are now independent with the MHRA. And I know they have been discussing a bill in the parliament, but yeah, that could be some kind of ideas. But for Europe, I see it really difficult because there's no legal empowerment at the level of Europe. And I really am afraid I don't have solutions at hand. We need those health economists to think of solutions, or legal people. It's not easily solved, I'm afraid.
Lydie, thank you. These are very important comments, and I think we've raised this whole idea of public drug development in our seminars, that this is very widely discussed in quite a few circles, Access to Medicines group, and one thing which becomes really clear is there is no legal and government backing behind it. And until this legislation framework changes, we're getting nowhere, because one agreement from Pfizer, great for one case, but it doesn't mean you'll ever get another one from another company. And once again, you brought up the book of Mariana Mazzucato. I mean, she made an amazing career on this. I completely agree with pretty much a vast majority of all the points she makes. The problem with all the points is these are good thoughts to have. There is no plan to action. There's absolutely nothing there which can tell you this is what really is doable and what needs to be done. And of course, we all know what how world could have looked better. And to me, this whole learning process, to me personally, it came in a very anecdotal sense when I was at NICE. I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, somebody called me saying, I got your phone number. I'm this researcher from King's College. We have this great cancer-related product. How can I get to the EMA? And I was stuck on the phone thinking, hold on, I don't really have an answer for you. And then I realized that the only way you can get to the regulator, you must be incorporated into a commercial organization. And an individual, but an individual just like that cannot go. You need an instance basically in the system at every level, from regulators, from political system, protectionism of the industry, massive power of patents and the industry makes this kind of step extremely difficult. And my vision of that is like, we need changes at the highest level. Like you said, it could be possible that the Secretary of Health can impose it. It should be not a possibility, it should be written into law. And we are nowhere close into this.
Yeah, that's true. Well, indeed, I think maybe now at the EMA level, there might be some an opportunity and some room to talk. We will have Immer Cook as the new CEO. I feel there's a new wind blowing, but yeah, it remains to be seen how far we will get there. And as Lisa said, it's really now the time, also with the Cancer Mission and the Europe's Beating Cancer Plan, to make a lot of noise, because all those politicians, they are there, and in the cancer plan they say we want the best treatment for the patients in Europe, but there's just no system to select the best treatment for the patient, and they want it at an affordable price. That's something they add. It was really funny. I was in the Gastein Forum. I was invited by the European Commission in the panel on the new pharmaceutical strategy, which is also quite an interesting point. And there, the companies were kind of surprised. They said that the Commission, for the first time, mentioned that they wanted affordable treatment. And for the industry, this was something really new with this new Commission. So you see how far away we are in that whole classical system from reality check. That's my idea.
I suppose the problem, though, lies with the idea of risk. And look, talking about John's biology, so I'm just going to throw a quirky idea out here. So just run with it for now. I don't have an answer, but because publicly funded sort of if you like, research and development of drugs is almost taken as a given that it's lower risk. And because it comes to philanthropy and donations and taxes, if it doesn't work, it's almost got a sort of an expectation that, oh, well, it's one of those things. Whereas, of course, a private or industry company would never run that way, because they've got to have their investors and return on investment. So you've got two diametrically opposed models on the finance side that are trying to talk to each other. Supposing we were to put the risk balance more in the public domain, whereby, for instance, supposing with marketing authorization, bearing in mind that pharma get a lot of their initial takeovers from publicly funded research at the beginning stage, if they're refusing marketing authorization, perhaps they should automatically donate 10% of their MA monies back towards publicly funded research. And so we have a bi-directionality arrow rather than all in one direction as a way to incentivize. I mean, these are just silly ideas, but it strikes me that we're on the one hand saying, oh, we've got high risk, and the reason why we have to have private enterprise is because they're the ones that do innovation. But then we're kind of saying with the same hat that we want to encourage public development, but we're kind of sort of saying there's a bracket around the fact that publicly funded enterprises can afford to sort of lose their money. And actually, I almost think maybe we should merge a bit of the expectations somewhere and do some biology rewiring. And after all, but cancer's brilliant at feedback loops. Maybe we should take a bit of a sort of lesson from it to see whether we can think about that with all these regulatory loops as well. I don't know. Anyway, it's just amusing.
No, but and it's really true that we really need more input from health economic people to look into all these ideas, because you're fully right. They say, oh, we have to support industry because they're doing all the innovation. Sorry, they're not doing the innovation. All the innovation is done at university levels, and then of course industry will absorb it, as I demonstrated with the cell therapy, and they will lower their risk by going there where there are already successes and doing all the Me Too stuff. So it's not true that they are taking all the risks with innovation. I don't buy that.
Indeed, Lydie, a lot of literature published from Aaron Kazelheim on this. So a lot of discussion goes into questioning who spends what and who gets what in return. Of course, development of drugs is very risky business. And I think we got the system wrong in many ways. So there's a lot of room for improvement. And hopefully the new generations will look back at the situation and say, seriously, how could they? But let's see. The world is an unpredictable place. In any case, I have to say a huge thank you to you. And I can't remember that I overran any of my scientific advice meetings by 20 minutes. So it was completely impossible. I don't think we ever finished the seminar later than 4 minutes into the hour. So impressive. You set an impressive record. So thank you so much for this interesting discussion. we'd like to have you back. I think there's so much to talk about. So
No, but I'm certainly happy to talk and on a direct individual basis and share my experience, our experience. Yeah, I think I'm really a big believer of the collaboration idea on the not-for-profit side. I think we should do that more if we want to get somewhere.
perfect. Next year, we hope to host more of events than individual seminars. And I really hope we can put an interesting panel where people can argue pros and cons, because not everyone shares our views. So we can
No,
the
but
battle.
open for dialogue.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Lydie, have a fantastic evening. Once again, huge thank you from all of us. And I'll be in touch, and the recording will be online. If you'd like this seminar to be heard by your colleagues, by the people you work with, definitely send them
That's a
the
good
link.
idea. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank
Good
you.
night,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
guys.
Bye for your
Bye.
interest.
See you all.
Thank you.
See you.